important part of meeting net zero. That's backed up by some serious money and sort of further ambition, and that there's more coming as we go through this year and onwards. I'm going to pass on to Greg now to just kind of talk about some of the aviation specific points that were in the 10-point plan, if you have to do that, Greg.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invite today. So yeah, just very quickly touching on what does the 10-point plan do for aviation. I think previous speakers at the event have touched upon the ATI's work, which is funded through BAYS, but something our part of government is very closely linked into. So some really exciting stuff going on. I think Zero Avia spoke earlier. Also, in the last few weeks, the announcement around hydrogen drone project, seeking to demonstrate the use of delivery drones over the Bristol Channel, which again, very exciting. So we're seeing lots of stuff coming through the aerospace manufacturing R&D pipeline that tells us hydrogen aircraft are sort of coming closer to our sector. We know that could mean a lot of change for airports and airlines. So part of the work announced in the 10-point plan from an aviation perspective is to start doing some of that work to help airports understand the implications of hydrogen use in the future, how it can interoperate with existing fuels in a potential sort of mixed fuel environment. Also on the sustainable aviation fuel side, funding to sort of kickstart more production here in the UK, and I think sort of finally our hydrogen hub, which has been mentioned initially in the Tees Valley. So this is really our initiative to try and sort of convene some of the work going on in aviation with things going on like Porterbrook talked about earlier on rail, some of the exciting maritime hydrogen projects, and of course buses. So where there are opportunities to test this new technology across transport modes, as a convening department of government, we want to encourage that to trial things once. And all this work will sort of ultimately sit underneath Jet Zero Council, which is a joint BAYS and DFT Secretary of State level forum where we sort of try and bring together the sort of manufacturing side of aerospace with the end users in aviation and the travel sector. So lots more to do, quite a challenge, the aviation sector in adopting to new fuels. Obviously we want internationally consistent standards, and sort of safety remains sort of priority for us, but lots to do. But I think to reassure you, we get the priority of this, and work is underway.
Okay, so thank you for that. Paul, are you able to just ask some questions, or do you want me to?
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. My mute's not working very well today, and so thank you. By way of appreciation, a few thumbs up there. So thank you for those, Ben. And we've learned an awful lot in that presentation about the formulation of a strategy around hydrogen. And when you look out, we're probably one of the last in the developing worlds of having a hydrogen strategy. So when you look towards the way in which the French, the Germans, maybe the Japanese, Australians are developing theirs, what do you think is different that characterises why the UK can be the best place?
So I think there are differences, quite obvious differences in some of the approaches that are being taken. And, decarbonisation doesn't exist in isolation from other requirements of any government. So things like energy security are a key question. And of course, what do you have on your doorstep? So I think you mentioned Japan. They have long been seen as the sort of, flag bearer of hydrogen as a hydrogen economy. And a lot of it is actually down to kind of certain, issues that they have locally, namely energy security. They don't have a lot of it, unfortunately, for them. So, likewise, Australia, one of their kind of closer neighbours that is an energy kind of rich area, is looking to the export potential to kind of meet that need. So you can see a lot of how they're looking at this issue kind of evolving in that context. Similarly, as you mentioned, some of our European neighbours have brought out hydrogen strategies that have been quite bullish and had some pretty big numbers behind them, which is great to see. And obviously we're very cognizant of that and bear it in mind. I suppose from the conversations that we've had and the kind of way we view that, the question is often, that's great, that's a good amount of X billion euros. What's the policy that's actually going to sit behind that to allow that to happen? And I suppose that's really how we view it. And I think the kind of greatest example of that is getting a business model right. Like the UK has, for instance, the largest offshore wind kind of deployment in the world. And the biggest reason for that isn't because we've just given capital amounts that allow people to build this stuff. It's because we've built an investable framework that companies can borrow money, can spend it to build that offshore generation, and then they can know that they're going to make that money back over an acceptable period of time. So that really is why we see that kind of approach as being so important to actually make this a realistic and a long-term way of bringing hydrogen into the energy system.
I think Paul's dropped off, so I'll just ask a couple of questions that we picked up. Certainly there's a couple of questions in terms about the policy and the funding streams at the moment. Obviously we're in a tipping point between establishing demand and therefore investment. At the moment, quite a lot of that investment is obviously going towards the production, and a lot of it probably focused towards blue-grey. Is the plans coming forward to actually look seriously in terms of how we invest in terms of the green side? Because ultimately it's the green side of the hydrogen economy that will actually deliver zero emissions. That's one point. And the other point is obviously what we've learnt over the last 2 days is, especially this is really for Greg, is maybe in the past we've been sector driven. What we're finding absolutely over the last 2 days is that we will no longer be sector driven in the development of these new technologies in terms of hydrogen for flight, for rail, for road, for marine. There is an interrelationship, and therefore it'd be useful with BEIS and the Department of Transport to engage in that rather than engaging separately. How do we actually engage in more cross-sector modes so that we get beneficial, for every pound that you want to spend as government, that you get more bangs for your bucks, basically. So they're the two real issues: is how do we get the supply side moving in green, and how do we then stimulate the demand in more cross sectors as we move through and government policies develop? How do we engage?
Sure. So I guess on the production side, and I can speak most of that because that's BEIS owns that area, and the team that I'm in works on that specifically. So as I mentioned, and I think sometimes the colours in hydrogen can be somewhat difficult to or used differently by various individuals. Low carbon is we have to be on that route, so that's clear. The production has to also be able to meet the kind of production scale and the costs that we know have to be met along the way. And again, this is not simply the view from government. This is the view from the CCC and others. So we look at that as the kind of a role, as I say, a twin track approach of both needing CCUS enabled hydrogen production, most likely from methane, but also potentially biomass in the future, and also then electrolytic production from renewable energy. Why do we see that? Well, again, we're informed by our advisors, so that's the first place. also, as I say, scale is a really important consideration here. If you look at an industrial cluster that might be using hydrogen in place of methane, you're in the hundreds of megawatts of actual energy use in that site. It's great, and there's already cases where electrolytic hydrogen's trying to fill some of that. Indeed, ITM are involved in industrial-related projects themselves. But that's an awful lot of energy to try and get, and in quite a quick space of time, in terms of developing from now to sort of 2030s and beyond. So we really do see a role for both those technologies. In terms of the investment and kind of orientation towards that, again, I'm kind of speaking from my policy area, so that's why the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund is orientated towards production, because we know that there is that kind of big step up that's needed. That's almost tenfold increase and a complete transition to low carbon. So we can't kind of underestimate the challenge there. But I suppose the other side of that is the spending that's going on around government to stimulate some of that demand. So again, from the industrial perspective, which again, I'm in the team I'm in and sit within an industrial energy directorate. And so we have things like the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. So that's a pot of money that will provide capital for, let's say you're a glass manufacturer and you want to move from using methane to hydrogen. You need to get your burners ready to be able to do that and test them for 1,000 hours to make sure they're safe. That kind of money will be orientated towards just that sort of end use. And as that happens, you've suddenly got your demand and your supply starting to join up. That's a very simplistic description, but there's very much kind of funding and consideration on both sides that we're looking to pull through.
So just on those 2 points, thanks Ben for that. There's a couple of questions. One's how much CCS is realistically feasible compared with various parts of the economy, including blue hydrogen. I know that are looking to fill the hard to solve gaps in decarbonisation. That's the first question. And the second one is, given the challenges highlighted by other speakers around hydrogen distribution, some have suggested that the main blocker to adoption could be just that. Will there be more investment in this? It seems the majority of the investment seems to be in production end use. Don't know if you want to take either of those.
Yeah, I'll take this quickly and then maybe let Greg jump on the other aviation point. But I suppose in terms of distribution, yeah, certainly, there are challenges in that space, and we hear that loud and clear. I think, again, speakers from EDF kind of talked about some of the question marks that live within this space. Is it easier to move electrons from one place to another and then produce your hydrogen, or is it easier to have your gas and then move it around? Well, we're actually very good at moving gas around. We've been doing it for years, and we've got a gas network that's fantastic for that. And it also just so happens that we're doing things like replacing some of the steel distribution pipes with polyethylene, not because we thought we need hydrogen, but because the HSE told us we had to make people's homes safer. But it just so happens that that's also a good thing for hydrogen. So, I guess what I'm saying is we've got some expertise there that can help overcome that problem. Again, I think often this comes down to how does government set the game to allow that to happen. At some point, someone has to pay for those changes. The way that we pay to maintain our gas grid and electricity grid is via our bills. And so, we're trying to kind of understand what's the way that we can sort of socialise that cost in the parlance of government.
Very topical today because our prices of energy are going to go up, aren't they, to us all?
Yeah, so exactly. And we have other questions like fuel poverty. So, none of this exists in isolation, I guess is what I'm saying. But I
guess there's a good point there, which is, we're going to sustainable technologies, whether it be SAF or hydrogen. The cost of flying may well increase as a result, and we're going to have to stomach that, I guess. There's probably a challenge here that we're all going to have to accept that our cheap tickets to the Balearics will no longer be so cheap. What does that mean for aviation? What does that mean for demand?
Well, I think I'd pay any amount to get to the Balearics at the moment, but personally. But yeah, I mean, it's those are the issues. So on the earlier point, we definitely take the point that we want joined up cross transport, particularly on the R&D spending issues. So we're not trying to spend government money on different transport modes if we can join them up. the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, which has come out this year. We'll say more on that, including on hydrogen. Clearly, our aim is people flying as much. We're not looking to restrict anyone. We're not looking to make aviation more expensive. We think the economic benefits of travel are significant. So it's certainly not our ambition for people to be paying more than they are today. It's an unfortunate phrase, but at the moment for their holidays to relax or elsewhere.
Greg, I know that we haven't got much of your time this afternoon, but I wanted to thank you for jumping on at this point. I know we're running out of time on
we're running out of time, and we need to basically move over to the next session.
Yeah, so I'll let you say thank you very much for both of you joining us today, and Ben, we're going to speak to you later. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good day.